the funding that's been made available through the Wisconsin Initiative Ag Exports is being put to good use. And again, thanks for being involved. Lisa, back to you.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks so much, and hope you have a great day. I just want to mention too, this is not an official meeting, so no official business will be taking place. I just want to make note of that for the record. And so now I'd like to introduce you to Molly Burns. She is the branded program manager for Food Export Midwest. DATCP is a member of Food Export Midwest, and by virtue of that membership, we have access to all of their programming. And she's going to give us an overview of the branded program, which is really an important funding source for our food and agricultural programs. So Molly, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I think, Mark, will you share the slides? Perfect.
Yes, and I'll do the presentation.
Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everybody. As Lisa said, my name is Molly Burns. I'm the branded program manager for Food Export Midwest. I'm really grateful to be speaking with you all today and sharing a little bit about our programs. I recognize some names on the webinar, so I think for some of you this may be an old hat, but glad to share the information and hopefully increase your knowledge about the resources available to Wisconsin exporters. You can keep going, Mark. So I like to start with the mission of Food Export, just to give you some background on where we're coming from. It's very similar to what DATCP is trying to do in the state of Wisconsin. Our goal is to promote the export of Midwest food and agricultural products, and we offer a variety of programs and services to make that happen. On the next slide, we kind of talk a little bit about where Food Export's coming from. So we're a nonprofit trade association, and we're kind of at an interesting intersection of federal resources. We're funded mainly through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, through the Farm Bill, but we have our members coming from the state departments of agriculture, including DATCP. Our focus is specifically on small and medium-sized producers and those who are working on value-added products. So we offer programs and services specifically to help those types of products succeed in the international marketplace. We partner very closely with Food Export Northeast, our partners in that region, and that just allows us to leverage more resources to help make those export programs possible. The kinds of companies we assist are very similar to the ones on this call. So we're looking at companies that are US owned. The companies must meet SB 8 guidelines to be considered small or medium size. This changes every couple of years. The standard definition is about 500 employees or less, but it really depends on the type of product that you're creating. We also work with agricultural cooperatives of any size. The companies that can use our programs, the products that they're promoting must have at least 50% US agricultural content, excluding water and packaging. And then finally, we're really looking at companies who are willing to fund export promotion and the ongoing support that's needed to make that happen. Many of you know exporting can take a while to get started, and we want to support you in that effort, but we need the company to show up with us halfway. So we're looking for businesses that are willing to put a stake into this venture. I mentioned we work with value-added products, and this can mean a variety of different things. These types of products on this slide are really focused on consumer-oriented food products. So a lot of branded products in particular, and that can fit into a dozen different categories: snack foods, convenience foods, specialty foods, private label, any of that type of thing. The next slide gets into a little bit more of what else we can offer. So we also work with pet food products. We can help out with food ingredients, feed ingredients. Our neighbors in the Northeast particularly work with seafood, but we've seen some fish products and such from Wisconsin and other Midwest states. And then we have this category of other value-added products, which frankly can mean anything from beeswax, lip balm to wood products, which is the next slide. I know there's a couple of companies that focus on wood products in particular, and we're glad to support those efforts. This slide lists some of the types of wood products that are eligible within the food export program. You can see we highlighted cooperage here, but there's a lot of different types of products that are eligible. So I just want to note that for wood products or any value-added products, we can work with you on the service I'm going to talk about next, which is our branded program. So to give you a little bit more context before we deep dive into the branded program, food export divides what we do into 3 categories. So first up is the green section on this fun graph, which is exporter education. It's all about helping educate companies on how best to export. And this can happen at the beginning of your export journey when you just don't know how to get started and are looking to get your feet wet, all the way to, you're doing an export sale, you have something stuck in customs, or you're having trouble with a bill of lading, and we can help out with some questions along the way. The next piece is the purple part, the market entry. So this is all about introducing US companies to buyers internationally. And we do this in a lot of different ways, really passive ways, like just sending trade leads to your inbox, all the way to setting up personalized, customized one-on-one meetings for you in an international market. So a lot of offerings there. But what we're going to focus on today is that red circle, the red part of the graph, which is our market promotion. So once you're in an international market or you're ready to take on some marketing activities, our cost share funding in the branded program can help support you. So the next slide gives a little more overview of what the branded program is. If you forget anything else in this presentation, the main thing to remember is the branded program reimburses 50% of your export marketing expenses. So 50% of any marketing activity you do that targets an international audience, we can reimburse that on the back end. It's a reimbursement program. So you're going to apply up front and get your activities approved. You'll go and pay for and conduct those marketing activities, whether it's a in-store sampling event like this photo or a trade show or whatever it might be. And then on the back end, you'll claim and get reimbursed through food export. A key thing I want to highlight is a big part of the program is promoting the US origin of your product within the marketing. So I put a picture of a product of USA sign sometimes we see on our promotions, but it's a key feature of how the promotions look on the back end. We want to see the promotion of the US origin of your product. Finally, just to note that the funding we can offer to companies per year ranges anywhere from $2,500 to $300,000 in reimbursement. We reimburse at 50%. So this means that your marketing costs for the year could be up to $600,000, and we'd reimburse 50% of that. Next slide. All right, so this is my umbrella slide. It just talks about what types of activities in general are reimbursed in the branded program. We highlighted one trade show, the Winter Fancy Food Show, which is eligible, but we'll talk about a lot more from there. I'm going to have a slide for each of these to give you examples of what types of activities we've supported in this program. My whole goal here is to get you thinking about what could work for your company. So don't think you're pigeonholed into these particular types of activities. We want to work with you to reimburse whatever marketing is coming up for your business or what's working best for your business. So the first type of activity and the one I want to talk about to highlight is trade show expenses. So the next slide gives some examples of what types of marketing is eligible with trade shows. These shows can take place virtually or in person, and we can reimburse for any trade show exhibit you're doing outside of the US. So I put a couple trade shows on here to get your mind thinking, but you can get reimbursed for any international trade show. And frankly, we see maybe 200-300 shows come through our door every year. Some of the expenses that can come up would be expenses just for the booth itself through the trade show organizer. Maybe you do some marketing outside of the show, like the new product showcase. Maybe you have a highlighted exhibitor listing online. We can help with those types of costs. We can help out with any sort of general contractor fees that come up, electrical, any sort of booth build out you might do, maybe new banners or signage, any part-time contractors that support your booth at the show. Maybe you have some giveaway items like keychains or stickers or whatnot. We can help out with those types of costs too. So those are some costs that come up with trade shows, and you know, it's really a pillar of what we can offer in this program. As Lisa Stout noted in the chat, the shows that I highlighted on this slide are ones that DATCP in particular is supporting in 2023. That can be in the wood industry with Interzum. It could be in the specialty food industry with Fine Food Australia. Coming up soon is Gulf Food. So just keep these shows in particular in mind. I know Lisa will talk a little bit more about them at the end. One more thing I want to highlight in this slide is that we can reimburse for travel related to international trade shows. We can't reimburse for travel at US shows, so the shows on this side, we would be able to support travel. But if you're exhibiting at a show internationally, we can cover your flight costs, hotel costs, and a small meals per diem each day. Travel can be a bit difficult. We have to follow travel regulations from the federal government. So we really like to work one-on-one with the businesses that are traveling to make sure your travel is reimbursed on the back end. So just a note to chat with us if that's something you'd like to do. If you go back, Mark, just to note, there are some US trade shows that are eligible for reimbursement. If you're new to exporting or exhibiting at these shows anyway as part of your marketing plans for a given year, we'd love to support your booth space at this show. So these shows target several different types of industries within the pet industry, natural products industry, the feed industry, and the like. I believe Wisconsin's going to have some booth space at the Taste of the States at the National Restaurant Show in May, but all of these shows would be a great fit, and we'd love to support your booth space there. Next up, the next few slides talk about the types of digital marketing that Food Export can reimburse for in the branded program. Frankly, this is where we're seeing a lot of businesses go when they look to the branded program, whether it's helping to develop your website to target an international audience or doing online advertising. So this slide highlights two types of activities we've reimbursed in the past. So on the left, for Bassett's Ice Cream, a Northeast ice cream company, they created a website specifically for South Korea. So it's got a .co.kr web address, and it's completely targeted to that market. So whether you go that in depth with a country or you just allow for language translation on your website, we're able to help support developing your website for an international audience. On the right is online advertising. So this is a pet food company that did targeted Google ads online. So you can see that they've got their products listed. You can click on the ad to go to the company's website, I think specifically targeting the Chinese market. You'll see the company highlighted where they put the Made in USA statement on each of these online ads. I noted at the beginning, we're looking for this in any promotion that we reimburse. So this is one way a business met that requirement. We'd love to work with you if this is something you want to chat more about. I think the next slide, we continue with digital marketing. So this is an example of a social media campaign we help support. Cherry Republic is a cherry company out of Michigan, and they created an Instagram page specifically for the Taiwanese market. So we supported costs with the photography for this site, the management and the content development for this Instagram page, and then the general upkeep of it over time. There's a lot of other website, social, digital costs we can help cover. You can see some of those listed on the right. Search engine optimization is one we're seeing grow, particularly on Google and other search engines. We talked about website development and servicing, any social media management, and then content development. One thing to keep in mind here is influencer marketing has certainly grown. Particularly, we're seeing this in the Asian markets. But definitely keep all of these digital marketing activities in mind as you look to the international marketplace. These are some more social media advertising that we've reimbursed for. So on the left is another Bassett's Ice Cream highlight. This is their Instagram page for South Korea. And on the right, this is an influencer talking about a pet food product. E-commerce is certainly part of the growing landscape for international. We see this particularly, we've helped support work on Alibaba. We've helped support some work in Europe and other markets. This is an example of a company that created a very personalized homepage on Alibaba for their kimchi sauce. So we can help with build out to this level, or if it's more about promotion on Amazon or something like that, we can help out with that as well. Video production is growing within the branded program. So this is a couple examples of videos we've supported. I want to highlight that this has worked for many different industries. So on the left is a company that offers cheese products for the food service industry. They just put together a short video talking about the offerings that they have in their product line. We help support the development and production of that video. On the bottom is an influencer on YouTube. And then on the far right is a more traditional TV commercial for US private label condiment products in the Middle East. The next slide is a still from a video of the harvest and processing for a company, a fruit cooperative out of Michigan. They highlighted their harvest with some drone footage. And it's a beautiful video that they translated into Chinese and have used to highlight their production. This has worked really well for companies, particularly in the food ingredients and feed ingredients industries. The next couple slides highlight some more old school marketing methods, but still certainly relevant today. You can see a couple different giveaway items we've reimbursed over time, whether it's hats, t-shirts, or of course in the post-COVID era, masks. So small giveaway items that companies make can be eligible. Next up, I think, is print advertising. So again, a traditional marketing method that's still quite relevant today. These are some ads that have we've reimbursed over time. These are some billboard advertising and then a truck wrap on the bottom right. So again, some more traditional methods for advertising. These are some marketing materials we've reimbursed. These are examples of some sell sheets that companies had developed and translated and such in the international market. The middle one here, the Toasty Takeover, I think is an interesting one to highlight. This is a company that creates and sells pickle products, particularly in New Zealand. They created an event called the Toasty Takeover, which supported and promoted their products within the food service and restaurant industry in New Zealand. They created a competition for the best toasty or sandwich in New Zealand that included their products. And it got a lot of press. They've continued to do it throughout the years. So I think a great example of a food service promotion we've helped support over time. Next up is in-store demos. So anything within the retail or in-store environment, we've helped support. This is a in-store tasting that we did for a company in the barbecue sauce industry. They did a tasting at a meat shop for their barbecue sauces. We helped support the reimbursement for their supplies, the display stand, the contract worker that did the tasting, and then paying the store to have the stand itself. Finally, I want to highlight export packaging and labeling. This has become one of the top ways companies use the branded program. We can reimburse for the production, translation, printing of your export packaging when it targets an international market. So these are two examples. On the left is an example of a company that created packaging specifically for the Russian market. And then on the right is packaging for popcorn that was translated into Arabic for the Middle East. So any work that you do, whether it's the design, production, printing, all of that would get reimbursed in our program. This is an example of a food service promotion we can help with. This is a chef demonstration. And on the left or on the right are some examples of what we could cover within this. Anything from paying the chef to room rental, freight to ship your samples to and from the events. That types of expense would be eligible. Finally, that was a great list of some of the activities we reimbursed for over time. I just want to say that all of those costs could be incurred by your importer as well as by your company itself. So if your importer is conducting the marketing on your behalf, they can be promoting your brand or their own brand that you're offering private label for. The importer needs to be a really important part of the reimbursement process. So we asked for their buy-in on providing all the documentation for the marketing that they did, and working with our staff to make sure that we can reimburse for that on the back end. This is a great way to support your importer's efforts and to create a little bit less work on your side. So please do let us know if this is of interest. We certainly want to be promoting not only what you are doing to attract an international audience, but what your importer is doing as well. All right, my last couple of slides are just about the mechanics of the branded program. So the branded program restarts every year. We just started our 2023 program. And the way the program works is you apply up front. So you're going to do a pre-qualification and an application that goes through an approval process. After that, you formally contract with Food Export in the program. Once you're fully approved and contracted, you can go execute your activities. You can go to Go Food with DATCP. You can do your in-store sampling event in New Zealand. You could print your export packaging once or twice in this year. Once you're done with that activity, it's paid for, it's printed, it's conducted. Then you'll submit a reimbursement request to Food Export on our website. And Food Export staff worked with you, and our goal is to get you a reimbursement check or ACH within 30 days. I want to note there are two annual fees to participate in the branded program. So in that step one, when you apply to the program, you'll pay a $250 application fee. This is a one-time fee you pay each year to participate in the program. And then in the third step, when you contract with Food Export into the program, you'll pay a 6% administrative fee. This is to cover Food Export's operating costs, and the fee is based on the amount of funding that you request. So if you request $2,500 for us in reimbursement, you'll pay 6% of that upfront, or $150 to participate in the program. To keep that fee low, we ask that you keep your requests low, and we feel that's the best way to approach the program, to submit a conservative request so that we keep your fees low, and you can request more funding later if you need to. I want to note a couple key dates. So we opened our 2023 year last August. Right now, if you want to participate, submit an application as soon as possible. At a minimum, you need to submit before you incur your expenses you want reimbursement for. We've had a lot of demand this year, so frankly, the sooner the better for this application. As I mentioned, it runs on an annual basis, so you can conduct activities through the end of this year, and then you have 2 months after the year to submit for reimbursement. It's an annual program, and we always suggest applying early. This slide just highlights how to get reimbursed. I talked about this a little before. You submit the claims online after your activity is done. You're going to submit some backup for each claim to explain what happened. Our staff will help you with any questions that you have. We follow up if we're uncertain of something or we need more information. And then, as I mentioned, our goal is to reimburse you within 30 days of submission. So that wraps up what I wanted to discuss about the Food Export Branded Program. Again, 50% reimbursement program for your marketing costs. We'd love to work with you, whether it's a small project or a multi-market big effort for this year. So please do reach out. You've got our information on this slide. My colleague, Paul Sorensen, who specifically works with companies in Wisconsin, is also on this call. So feel free to contact me or him if you have any questions. I guess at this point, I'll open it up to any questions. Lisa, I don't know if we've gotten anything in the chat we want to look at.
Yeah, there's one question that's come up. Are there any limitations for companies? For example, can they go to a specific show only once, or can a company return every year?
Great question. The company can return to a show any year. The company just needs to apply to the program every year and say they're going to go to, say, Gulf Food or whatever trade show it might be, or maybe it's an in-store promotion effort you're doing annually in a market. We recognize that it can take a couple of years to really ramp up and meet those consumers and get that face time with them for your product. As long as the funds are available and we feel that it's a good investment of the dollars, then we're going to support those promotions and take care of that year after year.
That is a good question. We used to have limitations,
Yeah,
by country and also by trade show, but those have all been lifted now. One of the participants asked about the copy of the presentation. It will be uploaded to our website after this webinar today. I just want to say this is a really strong program for our companies, and staff at DATCP reviews all Wisconsin applications, so we know who's applying and what they're applying for. That also helps us know where they're going. So I think that's a great question. And there was a question about the origin statement, Molly.
okay.
Which I will share with you if you're not familiar, but the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin has a couple of badges that they signify Wisconsin. These badges that are then used, or little logos that they use on product labeling. I'll share after the webinar those two badges to see if they would serve as the U.S. origin statement.
That sounds great. Yes, that's worked well for other industries, such as the ginseng industry. So yeah, I'd love to check it out. It sounds like it could be a good fit.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, Charles, could you just do a brief overview of the other activities that Food Export gets involved in, trade missions, trade shows, et cetera?
Sure. I might pass this to my colleague, Paul Sorensen. Paul, would you want to chat a little bit about the other activities Food Export offers?
Sure, yeah. I'll mention that Food Export contracts with a number of what we call in-market representatives around the world. They have their own marketing companies. They're really the boots on the ground in those markets, and we work with them to do a couple of different programs and services. So one of them being our buyers missions, where usually at a large trade show, a lot of the trade shows that Wisconsin will have pavilions at, Food Export can help provide reimbursement for through the branded program as well. We bring in these international buyers that are recruited from those in-market representatives. They represent markets around the world, and they're looking for U.S. products. So we get them here in the U.S., and then if you register by the early deadline, usually you can meet with those buyers at those shows for $150. So those really low cost, low barrier to entry to meet with those foreign buyers here in the U.S. The flip side of it is we do what we call focused trade missions, where we take U.S. companies and then travel to an international market where our in-market representatives then go out to the trade, present what sort of products are going to be promoted there at that trade mission through those companies, and then try to make like a really, like I said, focused matching between the buyers that are looking for those products and the suppliers that are going to be attending. There's also some additional retail tours, industry tours that are included in that, as well as some USDA Foreign Agricultural Service briefings from the FAS posts there in country as well. So it's a really quick kind of in and out, get meetings with foreign buyers, get a lay of the land of the markets, and really an easy way to get involved there, as well as some what we call Food Show Plus some add-on services available at a lot of these international trade shows where our reps can help get buyers to your booth, as well as vet some buyers that stop at your booth, provide interpreters, lots of different other services. That's kind of a very brief overview, but if you have any other questions of what else is available, I can definitely go on for a lot more, but in the interest of time, I think I'll stop there.
Thanks, Paul.
Well,
Any other
that's
questions?
great. Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Molly. Yeah. More questions, please. Well, hearing none, thank you very much, Molly, for being on with us this morning. And thank you, Paul, for participating as well. Take note of the website, www.foodexport.org. I recommend that all of you with interest go to the website, because there are many more programs, educational opportunities, country reports on the website. Just a great resource for our food and agricultural companies. I want to highlight there is another service called the virtual consultation. You can register to have 30 minutes with one of the 24 in-market reps around the world to talk about your product, and it'll be you'd submit some questions so the in-market rep knows what you want to learn about, and then you can have a virtual consultation via Teams or Zoom, and that would be a great way for you to do research into primary research into seeing if your product would be appropriate for a country market. And that's been a new service since COVID, and I'm glad to see it's going to continue. It would be a great way for you to talk with those in-market reps and for them to become familiar with you. So really, thanks so much today. Great information. And we'll be sure to get this presentation up to our website on the DATCP.wi.gov website. So thanks much. So next on the program, we're really excited and happy to have Peter Hirthe and his colleague Jasmine Jerkowitz, who are here from the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation. And we're going to hear about updates from that arena. So I will turn the program over to Peter. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to update you on activities within the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. I'm going to cover two topics today. I'm going to touch base on our recently concluded 2022 navigation season, which actually just ended with the Welland Canal closing on Monday of this week. There was a 1-week extension beyond our normal December 31st closing date for the Welland, which we'll talk about shortly. And I also want to kind of give an overview of agricultural export developments throughout the Great Lakes. And I'll talk a bit then about how they impact this region. We'll get right into it here. So just a quick overview of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. Giving you the regional scope. All of the ports on this map are regular points of loading and unloading for vessels within the system. I'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward, but all the way out to Septiel in the upper right-hand corner, that's a major aluminum import port for the ports of Oswego and Toledo, bringing aluminum in for manufacturing through the St. Lawrence Seaway. So that's why a port that far up the St. Lawrence River, it would be included. So who we are, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation is an administration and agency within the U.S. Department of Transportation. It's the smallest agency within the department. Its focus is operations and maintenance of the U.S. portion of the St. Lawrence Seaway, which essentially consists of operating and maintaining 2 locks in Messina, New York, on the St. Lawrence River, between Montreal and Lake Ontario. We have to operate a vessel traffic control system within the St. Lawrence River. We're working to update that with a new technology to literally control arrival times, very much like air traffic control, lines up the airplanes, brings them in efficiently one after another. We're working to do that with the similar type of system, integrated system with our Canadian partners. My role within the agency is trade development. There's an Office of Trade and Economic Development. Our job essentially is to raise awareness and visibility of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system internationally to grow trade with the lakes, both import and export. And that is my role specifically as the Great Lakes Regional Representative. Some of you on this call know me from my time spent as the Trade Development Representative for the Port of Milwaukee. I spent 5.5 years there and left in fall of 2019 to essentially take on the same role in an expanded form, working with all of the US ports within the Great Lakes system, St. Lawrence Seaway system. So essentially it's the same scope, just added about 20 more US ports and terminals to the portfolio that I was working on. So I'm very excited again to see the familiar faces on this call. I was involved quite heavily with the Intermodal Subcommittee when I was at the Port of Milwaukee, State of Wisconsin, the Freight Advisory Committee. I know I spent time interacting with, as well as obviously Wisconsin Department of Transportation, the Harbor Assistance Program staff. So in my new role, I work daily with the Canadian Seaway. They are our partners in a binational operation to oversee the efficient, safe, reliable service through the St. Lawrence Seaway system and its 15 locks. So the Canadians have 13 additional locks to the US's 2. There are a total of 7 locks between Montreal and Lake Ontario, and 8 locks make up the Welland Canal. The difference, one of the major differences with the Canadian Seaway is they charge tolls through their locks, whereas the US does not. We have a budget, annual budget that we operate under. On the Canadian side, the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation is hired by Transport Canada to operate the Seaway system, and tolls are part of their revenue generation to meet their budgetary needs. There's also a highway H2O program managed by the Canadian Seaway. We are members of that as the US Seaway, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. Here's just a quick overview of the lock system. The 7 that are in the St. Lawrence River, the Welland Canal, of course, the Soo locks everyone's familiar with. There is a significant expansion, redundancy being done for the PO lock to allow the largest vessels transporting cargo between Lake Superior and the lower lakes. But that is managed and run by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and not by the U.S. Department of Transportation. So that's the biggest difference there. It's just as critical for international trade with ports and terminals on Lake Superior, but independent from St. Lawrence Seaway management. So the reason we have the St. Lawrence Seaway system is we have a 60-story height difference between Lake Superior and the Atlantic Ocean. And that's made up for by the Seaway locks and the Soo locks. So I had a great visual when I was at the Port of Milwaukee, where I would sit next to, on a tour, sit next to the vessels that came in, look at the US Bank building, and point out that you were essentially trying to come from the bottom of that building well over the top of it. And it was a nice visual when it worked. Anyway, that's just a quick overview there. Some quick facts about the Seaway system. It's 2,300 miles from the Atlantic Ocean to the head of the lakes in Lake Superior, 8 US states, 2 Canadian provinces. Operates about 285 days of the year, mid-March through December 31st, typically. Although, as I mentioned, there is an additional week on the Welland Canal section that has been going on just to allow Laker vessels to reposition for the spring, whether they end up at a port they want to originate, so they get them essentially to a port they can originate from in the spring with cargo. During the time the Seaway system is open, it's 99.5% or better reliable, meaning there are not delays typically other than weather events where visibility and things like that are a safety concern. So typically that 0.5% is a safety related concern outside of our control. And the reason we're able to do that is essentially because of the regimen, the maintenance regimen, and the reinvestment we've done in the system over the last decade. Where almost $1 billion has been put into the system overall, and about 1/3 of that by the U.S. Seaway. So the vessels you'll see, Lakers, Salties, tug barges. What's important to note, and why the system is a critical supply chain, is that the region on its own, the Great Lakes, those 8 states and 2 provinces, would be the 3rd largest economy in the world with their GDP of 5.5 trillion. We are a maritime supply chain, international, in and out of that system. And when you're through that system, it truly is binational. Vessels going from the eastern end to the western end will literally cross the international border with Canada 27 times if they follow the traditional routes. So I want to give a quick overview of the last 3 years. It's been a roller coaster with a few, higher highs and lower lows, perhaps, than we would traditionally have for obvious reasons. We had various sectors impacted in 2020. Manufacturing and auto had shut down. Steel was not moving. Construction was not being done. But we had incredibly strong grain and project cargo years, with wind energy cargo setting a record in the Duluth port, 10 ports handling wind cargo. Grain was up significantly over the 2019 season. So despite the challenges of that year, we're actually only down 1.6%. 2021, we started to rebound a little bit. Grain was impacted, project cargo was impacted, delayed from the 2020 pandemic, but we started to see sectors of strength in steel, construction, and manufacturing rebound. So again, we bounced back, gained back what we had lost the year before, 1.1% up. A whole different chemistry, if you will, recipe for how the cargo moved through the system. And then last year, while we don't have final numbers, only a few days out, we were lagging 6.8% behind at the end of November, with a strong December push, a lot of that in the agricultural export sector. So while we do expect to be down year over year, a lot of that can be directed, a significant part of whatever percentage we end up behind will be the wheat crop. The wheat crop last year in 2021, especially with our Canadian partners, was significantly weak compared to traditional harvests. And we saw that in the number of Laker vessels taking wheat out of the system this year being dramatically down. Typically that would be our #1 commodity moving out of the system. And it's yet to be seen if that will be the case this year in terms of volumes. But we did have a good year for U.S. grain. We believe the U.S. grain, when all the numbers are in throughout the system, will be increased, primarily in corn and soybean strength moving out of the system. We also saw other sectors of strength. Coke was going out of the system internationally at a high volume, along with potash exports, mainly from our Canadian partners. And U.S. container volumes were very strong. I believe when all the numbers are in, the volume will have essentially doubled year over year in terms of container volumes throughout the system. And we'll talk more about that shortly. So here we have 3 navigation seasons, 3 very different formulas. What has been consistent is we've traded with over 50 countries each navigation season, and we've maintained our safety and reliability of over 99.5 during each of these navigation seasons, from when we open the doors to when we close the doors, or locks in this case. So there has been, while there's been some variety, some variability in some things, in the things that are important in terms of safety and reliability, we've maintained a high level of performance and consistency. Essentially, those 50 countries, primarily the Americas, primarily Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, but the Americas and Asia do bring cargo in, and we do see some cargo exported to them. More often, if you're outside of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, it's inbound cargo. And we can talk some more about that moving forward as well. But this is just a list of the countries that we've seen trade with, whether it's, some of this could be containerized, a lot of it is obviously bulk cargoes. And just on this map, if you take a look, we have Seaway origins, we have transshipment destinations, and then we have direct exports. The reason on that first map I showed you was we show all the ports east of Montreal in the St. Lawrence River, is there's a heavy amount of transshipment, both inbound and outbound, that takes place, where you have larger vessels that can't transit the Seaway system because of the size of the locks. Either drop off on inbound, drop off in those lower St. Lawrence ports and reload to a smaller vessel, or vice versa. Laker self-unloaders take bulk products out to those transshipment ports and load them on larger vessels, perhaps Panamaxes, things that can carry a lot more tonnage than the vessels that come through the Seaway system. So the transshipment ports are a critical part of the international trade formula for the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. Something I really want to convey is that every vessel that enters the system essentially creates additional export capacity out of the system. Since we're talking about exports here, I think that's important to understand. Essentially, a Seaway vessel, consider it an 8,000 to 22,000 metric ton container in itself for cargo exports. And those exports are critical. They provide the lane balance that that helps with the value and the business proposition of using the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway. We had a unique year last year. I'll touch base on that shortly, where this hasn't necessarily, this statement was, we put an asterisk by this for 2022. The 2022 navigation season in some ways was quite unlike one we've seen in quite a while. If you just want to think about, we're coming off a year and a half or two of supply chain disruptions, and add into that the conflict that we've seen in Europe. And it created some interesting observations of traffic flows in and out of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. Wheat export volumes impacted, I alluded to that. Ocean vessel volumes actually increased into the system, even though our final tonnage will show us down, our vessel volumes increased. That we know from the data through the end of the season. And consequently, from the wheat issue, the Lakers taking wheat out to the lower St. Lawrence transshipment ports, those decreased. Of those increased ocean vessels coming into the system, very similar number, if you look at the number of additional vessels that came in 2022, that was about the same number or the same increase in the vessels ballasting in for cargo. Ballasting in essentially means vessels came into the system without cargo. And that was most certainly driven by supply chain disruptions elsewhere that required those goods to be attained through the Great Lakes region. And so vessels actually, because of the high value and short supply of certain, certain cargoes, had to utilize the Seaway system to get what they needed for their customer base. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. The Cleveland Europe Express Liner Service, which is our scheduled container service into the Great Lakes, operates between Antwerp and Cleveland on a monthly basis, increased the number of container vessels, and also ran its first full season with a dedicated container vessel. What's interesting about that service is it's operated by a Dutch vessel company, Splitoff. They started taking those vessels farther into the system to handle containers. one of the and the main destination that they went to for that was Duluth, which had its first full season through Duluth Cargo Connect of maritime container operations. They were able to export this year, and in the December, I believe they brought in a vessel with inbound containers as well. So it was an exciting year from that standpoint, when I'm going to specifically talk about that. Corn and soybean exports last year, while wheat was down, corn and soybean exports, both in the US and Canada, were strong. Corn was very strong, both in US and Canada, for exports moved out of the system in bulk. Those volumes helped to compensate a little bit for the wheat, but relative to wheat, all the other ag exports are a fractional or a smaller percentage. So again, the wheat impact was hard to overcome. Inbound steel was stable. We think at the end it'll be down a little bit, and that had something to do with the conflict overseas as well. But that's a staple of the system, steel in, grain out. Wind energy project cargoes were strong on the eastern half of the lakes, with New York and Michigan receiving quite a few. What's important to understand about that is that those wind energy project cargoes, the stronger they are, that's the more vessels coming in, again, as those empty containers that can be filled with grain. And many of the wind energy project cargo vessels that come into the Great Lakes take grain back out of the system. So they expand the export capacity of the system. So more wind energy in, just like any other cargo in, specifically adds to the export capability and capacity. And one of those ports that benefited from those wind energy project cargoes coming into the system this year was the Port of Oswego. They built a new ag export facility with, I believe, $16 million of state of New York funding to load export vessels this year. The first full season that facility was in operation. And corn and soybean exports left upstate New York via that. I think at the end of the year, it's going to be 4 or 5 ships. So it was a good first year, and Oswego's geographic location at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River means almost every vessel leaving the system goes right by it. Also in high demand this year on vessels that we think were ballasted in, or vessels ballasted in to get, were coke and potash that were in short supply in other parts of the world and plentiful in the Great Lakes. So those were other cargoes that we saw strong years from. This is just a quick picture from the Oswego grain elevator looking out at Lake Ontario. This was the first vessel they loaded. This was a soybean vessel loaded in early April of this year. So just to give you a little perspective, and a little sunrise shot too. So, so the Seaway has seen an opportunity over the last several years with all these supply chain disruptions and maritime supply chains under stress. We've been looked at from areas that maybe haven't looked at us in a long time as a maritime supply chain, as well as had outreach from folks who didn't really fully understand how to utilize the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. And there's a lot of factors at play in this. There are container shippers who are looking for maritime alternatives, landborne issues, whether it was with backups at coastal ports or rail service issues. We had a lot of those discussions. International buyers on the export side seeking alternative sourcing. Agricultural products led that discussion, along with, as we saw, coke and potash folks looking for sourcing because their supply chains were disrupted, are disrupted. And we can have all these discussions because we have vessel capacity. We could certainly double the number of vessels we bring in and through the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system, and probably do better, especially if we get a vessel traffic management system online, more like the air traffic control type of system. We can get them through effectively, efficiently, reliably. And the reliability is critical to be open when we do open the doors in March. That we stay open, that we don't have delays, that you can count the days from departure to arrival at your port of origin and destination. And what's helped us a great deal since 2020, and just coincidentally, it took full effect in 2020, is a hands-free mooring system. And I'll talk about that in a second too. It's increased the number of vessels that can access the Great Lakes. Again, the demand, third largest economy in the world. There are goods here and there's a need for goods here, both on the supply, import and export side, which has led to a lot of discussions when other supply chains have been disrupted. The steel in, grain out model has been a big component of those discussions, because that is what traditionally comes in and goes out in significant volumes. We as a Seaway and our stakeholders in the system try to promote the sustainability, more maritime miles, less landborne miles, of using maritime transportation and taking trucks and rail cars off the road and rails, and trying to add a little more balance, rebalance. We're underutilized, and so if there are delays at the coastal ports, we think we can be a relief valve and help balance those things out. And the good thing is that as opportunities have presented themselves, they've helped some of our ports and terminal stakeholders make business cases to invest in infrastructure. And a lot of that is underway throughout the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. And there's a lot more sources of funding for our ports and terminal partners. Maritime Administration's PIDP grants, Wisconsin's HAP grants, Ohio has a maritime assistance program. And there's also grants available from the EDA and the EPA, port electrification program, which is coming, which will help our ports increase sustainability and diversify and expand. So it's an exciting time. Real quick, this is hands-free mooring. These are essentially suction cups that are put on the locks. And the reason this has been really helpful to marketing the system is the world fleet of vessels that want to come into the system don't just need to be sized properly, essentially to fit in the locks. Previous to 2020, they had to have line handling capability, wire cable capability, where they could be guided by personnel on the dock to move through the lock system. With hands-free mooring, that's gone away, meaning vessels don't have to invest in that line handling, meaning any vessel of the proper size on the ocean fleet can come into the system. And we believe that that's almost tenfold increase the number of vessels that can come in, which allows for spot purchases or spot deals to be made from any vessel, say in the St. Lawrence River, that can come through the system from a size perspective or a design perspective, that they no longer need to have that investment of line handling capability on their ships, which was a $250,000 to $500,000 investment for a vessel. So we've really made the system through this technology more easily accessible for deals to be made in a short time span. So how are we trying to seize this opportunity in more specific ways? There's effort underway now to develop a true Great Lakes container network to diversify the Seaway export lane more so. Traditionally, we've been thought of as a bulk system. We're trying very hard to do that. Cleveland started their service, container service with Europe in 2014, sorry. And with the expansion that they did last year, is handling the largest number of containers that they ever have. And I believe may have so much as doubled their traffic in 2022 over any previous year. And that's a direct connection between Cleveland and Antwerp with several vessels a month. Now with Duluth having attained U.S. Customs and Border Protection container clearance capability in 2021 and having just completed their first year, we have bookend ports on each end of the system that can handle containers. And I know that Duluth has done moves this year, as some folks on this call are well aware, and is really teeing up and preparing to have a much stronger and more consistent traffic flow of containers in 2022. And we're working to get the word out internationally with respect to that capability and connectivity that is now in Duluth. What's really exciting from a system perspective is the Port of Monroe, Michigan, which is between Toledo and Detroit, now has full funding and is in the process of finishing design work to construct a new container terminal that will hopefully be completed near the end of 2023, but certainly in time for the 2024 navigation season. And that's important because the more destinations and origins within the system, the more vessel traffic we will see as a system. And other ports in the Great Lakes continue to evaluate their container markets. Chicago is the big market that's not served currently. We have ports looking at that in Lake Michigan, and we do fully believe that one of those ports will be engaged with Customs and Border Protection to achieve the container clearance they need. And once that's in place, then we will have our 4 Western lakes all served by containers, and we expect that to lead to a more schedule-friendly service within the system. So keep an eye out for developments in Lake Michigan with respect to container movements. I think those are coming, and when they do, they will really make the system a container network. And getting the Chicago market online is important from a volume perspective. So we're not just focused on that, we're also focused on increasing our bulk export capabilities. Our stakeholders have been investing a lot of money to expand shipper access. I talked about the Port of Oswego's new facility, talked about the Port of Duluth's container capability, but the Port of Duluth also has just seen an idled elevator purchased. Hanson Muller last year purchased, I believe, one of the General Mills elevators, and has put that back in service, adding some bulk capability, export capability to the Port of Duluth, expanding it. And of course, in 2023, in Port Milwaukee, a project I'm quite familiar with from my time there, the DeLong Company will open their export terminal to further grow agricultural export capacity out of the Great Lakes and out of the Wisconsin market as well. And what we're really trying to do with all of these developments is promote them in overseas markets, touting agricultural exports from the Midwest and the heartland of North America. How we do that, and ways we're trying to do that, is to identify and engage all the new ocean carriers that come into the Great Lakes. We track vessels through our locks every day. We know who the carriers are. We know what the cargoes are coming in. We're trying to work with those vessel carriers inbound who aren't familiar perhaps with the export opportunities, and make sure that they're aware of all of the agricultural export options in the Great Lakes. This past season, that worked tremendously well with the Port of Oswego as a new port. Some of the vessels coming into the eastern side of the lakes were able to work out export deals with the Port of Oswego, not knowing any other options available in the system. And we try to do that system-wide on a case-by-case basis to make sure that every new carrier and shipper that's coming into the Great Lakes knows what their options for exports are. What we are working as well to do, and I alluded to this with the container network, is to amplify the liner services with Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, who are our geographic partners. The shortest distance is a straight line, so when you get out of the St. Lawrence, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, it's a straight shot to those markets. So we're working to expand our networking in that region. And there's also another option that you could see, especially on the container side, which is feeder services. Some of the East Coast ports, perhaps Halifax, perhaps the Port of Montreal, even outside of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system, have the capability to handle containers and take them to destinations internationally, globally, connecting to those liner services for containers. would only expand our reach and connectivity from the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. So what we really want to do is just provide shippers within the system with more options to consider. And the containers are important because for many, probably say decades, being able to talk to container shippers as a St. Lawrence Seaway employee hasn't been a conversation that's been worth having because the services weren't available. And now we're seeing that area grow. So, and we want to try to do that in all other sectors where we can. And what you're going to also see is some short sea shipping within the system, maybe to move things around to get them to ports, perhaps getting cargo to Cleveland that can get on a liner service in Cleveland. You'll see more of those types of moves coming into play as well as stakeholders within the system look for ways to grow. And again, underlying all of this is the continued port infrastructure investments that are being made within the system. That they add container capability, warehousing and storage, and connectivity in form of rail and road expansion. So all of that's coming, all of that's underway. I'm happy to engage on any specifics anyone on this call would like to. I just want to give a brief overview of how, as the GLS, we're trying to accomplish that visibility and awareness of the system. We're working to expand an overseas trade mission program, which will include both import and export dialogue. Our trade show visibility by expanding the number of trade shows we go to get the word out. We do a lot of Seaway 101 overseas with folks who just are used to the traditional get it to a coastal port, even if the cargo is going into the heartland of North America. So we try to explain the option and make sure that if they want to engage, we connect them and catalyze conversations to see if the opportunity to use the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system is a valuable one. We've been expanding our trade association membership. We held a conference in Milwaukee about a year ago, or in spring of last year, with the Soya and Specialty Grains Alliance that focused on the Great Lakes maritime export lane for agriculture. U.S. Grains Council participated in that, but we're members of that, National Grain and Feed, U.S. Soybean Export Council on the ag side, also Clean Power, which is really the wind energy component of that because of the vessel traffic. So we're working with all those associations and trying to amplify our visibility within them. But we also, it's critical that within those 8 states that we have outreach on the state and local level, local being the port specific level, and regionally with state governments and a lot of the folks on this call to try to understand each region and their needs and their opportunities. And so wherever we can engage on that regional level, we want to try to do that. And I was talking to Mark, and we will certainly be, as we develop our agendas and itineraries moving forward, we'll make sure that our stakeholders in Wisconsin are aware of them and can participate to whatever degree is possible. So I have some website resources here that would be great if you'd like to get more information. You can look at these and then you can reach out and we can discuss. I think the one that may be of interest is the top one here, greatlakesseaway.com, which is binational website. And there's traffic reports in there if you want to look at the types of commodities that are moving out of the system and in what volumes. So again, you've got those that'll be on the posted presentation. And with that, I'll leave it for questions. I thank you very much for this opportunity. And again, just wanted to kind of give you an overview of where we are as a system and where we are going.
Thanks very much, Peter. Are there any questions from the group? Oh, I do have one. So as Duluth continues to add more capacity, what do you think will be the improvements for scheduled regular container freight? Is there any kind of plan to position containers for outbound?
I think the answer is, if you look at what Cleveland did with a monthly service when they started in 2014, I think that's kind of ultimately what Duluth is positioning itself for, is to try to have that kind of a regularly scheduled service. I know they're working very diligently to develop a customer base. I talked earlier in this presentation about lane balance, and it's really important, especially in containers, that the containers inbound and the containers outbound are in a relative balance with each other. And I do think the container, establishing a container, how did he phrase it in that question, Lisa? A container.
To have regular scheduled container freight and position the containers for outbound transport.
Yes, and I do think positioning containers for outbound is part of their plan. The Duluth Cargo Connect has been very aggressive this year in trying to establish all the, in 2022, in establishing all the necessary relationships and foundation to really develop it into more of a scheduled service. And I know that's their goal for this navigation season, is to have that. But it is a process, and I do think, though, they've got the momentum, and they were able to do some moves in both directions last year that they're trying to build off of.
Here's another one. Are there any common reasons you hear regarding why more businesses don't utilize the Seaway? Is it awareness, logistics, or something different?
Awareness is part of it. It's amazing that you can go to some of the places we go to, maritime ports internationally, and you can engage with freight forwarders and even shippers, beneficial cargo owners, who aren't aware that you can bring vessels into the Great Lakes region. I think there's an education process overseas especially that needs to be done. But because we don't have the scheduled services, it's not on the radar, a high level of scheduled services. It's not on the radar perhaps of the freight forwarding community. Our number one target, I would tell you, is the freight forwarding community, not just overseas, but in the Great Lakes region. I think what you're going to see over the course of the next coming year and a half are a lot of regional freight forwarder conferences hosted by the Seaway, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway Development Corporation, to essentially, within our backyard, expand the use of the Great Lakes. With some container service now in place and growing, it's a good time to get that word out to try to help build some momentum for our stakeholders, such as Duluth and Cleveland and Monroe now coming online, to help the word get out that there is a container option, at least that can be looked at and discussed. And perhaps in the past, historically, that hasn't existed. And so a lot of the freight forwarding community just hasn't paid attention to the Great Lakes. And we need to get the word out now, especially that changes in the works and on the container side of things. But really, there's still a great deal of awareness internationally and education that we are continually doing. So I would say that's foremost.
Do you have a timeline for availability of refrigerated container equipment at Duluth?
No, I do not. I know, though, that is again on their agenda. And I think that's a business case. It's going to come down to developing the balance that they want to have in that. And I know there are, I'm sure, some folks on this call who are interested specifically in that on the outbound. And I think they're working to have that same kind of balance on the inbound as well to make the business case for it.
Great. Any other questions? Either shout them out or put them in the chat. Here's a question. What are the limitations for hazardous goods?
Yeah, that is definitely a question you have to discuss with the ports and the carriers in terms of what they can transit through the system. And I don't have the specifics, the checklist of what isn't, but there certainly are some things that are more of a challenge, we'll say.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Well, Peter will be around through the whole webinar today. So why don't we move into the next section? And so if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can always ask Peter at that time. But now we're going to move into our a readout from Katy Sinnott of Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation on their 2023 activities and moving forward, what their plans are. So Katy, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Lisa. I think for everyone on the call, if there's anything to take away from our conversation thus far, is that there are a lot of resources out there for our export community, as well as our import community, and it's on us to get all of that information out. So thanks so far, learning from the Food Export Council, very great information, as well as from Peter, really interesting, thank you. So WEDC has a suite of 4 programs to help exporters expand to new markets, bring products to market, etc. The first program that we have here on the screen is our global trade ventures, and these are incredibly important. There's nothing more important than getting your boots on the ground. During COVID, we did virtual trade ventures and we continue to do those. But you'll find that going in country to see how your product's used, how your competitors work, how your product is distributed, supported, maintained, is essential to really breaking into that market. So we have a suite of different trade ventures for the fiscal 22-23 schedule for the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Some of them on the screen, they've already passed. For example, we were in South Korea, we went to Britain and Scotland, Australia, New Zealand just finished. We're currently just about to start our virtual trade venture to Israel. And then our next upcoming trade venture is to Mexico in February, and that sign up has already closed. The 3 that are currently still open and we're taking signups are Canada, Vietnam and Thailand, Belgium and the Netherlands. So Canada offers lots of opportunities for new to export folks. Vietnam and Thailand are for a more mature exporter, someone who has exported to other countries, and Belgium and the Netherlands are kind of in between. So during WEDC's trade ventures, I just want to cover kind of the different things that we offer as a service to you. Exporters who go on our trade ventures really only need to be ready to sell their product. They need to have their pitch, they need to have their documents and their marketing material in the language of that country that will help them sell better. What WEDC does for companies is everything else. We have our in-country representative network in about 94 countries who will set up your one-on-one meetings based upon your objectives. So if you're looking for a distributor, our trade rep in that country will look for distributors for you, and they will work through that list to see who is the appropriate, who are the appropriate companies to meet with. In addition, WEDC will set up your hotel. We will arrange for interpretation. There is nothing worse than getting in a country where you don't speak the language and you find that perhaps they don't speak English as well as you had imagined. Your meetings will not be successful. So WEDC ensures that every meeting you would take during our trade venture would have a highly qualified interpreter with you if required, to ensure that your meeting is successful. We'll have your hotels, your car transportation, so you'll also have your interpreter along with a vehicle that will take you to each of your meetings, so that you don't have to worry about when you're in Korea and you can't read Korean, is it a left over here? Which floor do I go to? You'll have your interpreter with you and your driver will know exactly where you're going. And we also support you in the intercity transportation, whether it be air, bus, or rail. So there are a lot of things that we set up during the trade ventures that a business no longer has to worry about, which you would have to worry about if you went on your own. The other things to think about when you're going on the trade ventures is our market development directors really work with you to understand that market to make sure it's a good fit for you. You'll have an initial meeting with our market development director as well as our trade representative so that they can understand your objectives. And each of the market development directors that you see on the screen here, they have a geographic focus, and that's who you should contact. If you're interested in Europe, you'll want to call Rome Router. If you want to export to Mexico, it would be Francisco Carrillo. Please take a look at those geographic focus areas. It's also important to know that even before the trade venture, these trade representatives and our market development directors are available for you. They will speak to you about your product. If you're thinking about 3 different markets, talk to those trade reps. Have a conversation with our market development director. See if you are export ready for that particular market. Different markets have different complexities. If you're really new to exporting, we wouldn't suggest that you go to China immediately, for example. So those people are your contacts to our entire trade representative network around the world that we contract with for you. And we've negotiated special pricing, for example, for market assessments and partner searches. And that's the last thing I would want to comment about the trade ventures is our partner search is so valuable. If any of you could think about how you have gone about finding 3 to 4 vetted leads per day. So this is about 5 days. Each trade venture is about 5 days. So you're going to have 15 to 20 vetted meetings that meet your objectives. Think back to doing that on your own. I'm sure you can imagine and remember how difficult that is. So that alone is a reason to come along with us on those global trade ventures. Also, I just want to comment real briefly about our International Market Access Grant, which is between $10,000 and $25,000. Katy Udak on our team would work with you to support you in applying for that International Market Access Grant, or IMAG, and that can be used to travel to trade shows. You can use it to translate your material or translate websites. You can use it to do a market assessment if you want to go to a different country than WEDC is going to for the trade ventures. You can go do your own self-guided trade venture. You can enlist one of our trade representatives to set up a whole meeting schedule for you, and that grant program can help finance that for you. So there are a lot of ways to use our grant program as well. Lisa, any questions maybe?
Thanks, Katy. Are there any questions from the group? And while you're thinking of those, I do want to mention that you can use both programs. You can use the International Market Access Grant from WEDC, and you can apply for the branded program from Food Export Midwest. And we are happy to talk you through what you use those things for. You can't use them obviously for the same thing, but we don't want you to leave any money on the table. WEDC has this International Market Access Grant available every year. If you qualify for 10,000, we'd like for you to apply and try to use that money. And then above and beyond that, you can use the branded program as well. And so there's a way to use both programs, and we want you to be able to take advantage of both of them because they're valuable funding resources for you to expand your exports. So any questions? And if there aren't, this is our International Agribusiness Center team here at DATCP. We're divided geographically and by product sector, geographically much like WEDC. Katy, thank you so much. I'm glad you are here today to talk about your trade ventures coming up. And we do have agricultural companies interested in these trade ventures. So we're we're happy to help you guide you through that process with WEDC too, and take advantage of those resources. But this is our team. Gives you an opportunity to see who we have. Jennifer Liu covers Asia for animal feed forestry, ginseng and mink, livestock and genetics. Shirley Acedo, our newest member of the team, covers processed foods and food ingredients for Latin America and the EU and Africa. And Luis Santana covers animal feed fertilizers, livestock genetics for Latin America, Africa, EU, Middle East, and Canada. So, and Mark heads up our total group. So we're going to be talking about doing a readout on what we have coming up in the next 6 months. And this will be done chronologically. I'll be heading out on Saturday to the Fancy Food Show, which is a large domestic trade show which gets international buyers, and I'll be accompanying the USDA Cochrane Group coming from Thailand. They are importers of dairy ingredients and cheese, so I'll be going along with the group and actually following them for about 2 weeks, not only in Las Vegas, but also through Wisconsin as they make site visits at dairy plants and retail outlets. But there are also, many more Wisconsin companies that exhibit at the Fancy Food Show to meet with their domestic and international buyers. There's International Dairy Week coming up in New Zealand, and Jennifer Liu will be going to that. And we have a Wisconsin livestock and genetic companies participating in that show in New Zealand. Gulf Food will take place in February. We have DATCP has a pavilion at the show in the USA pavilion. We have 2 dairy companies exhibiting, but in addition to that, we have Wisconsin companies exhibiting in the U.S. Dairy Export Council exhibit space in the dairy hall. And we do have processed food companies that are exhibiting either in the USA pavilion or maybe possibly in the meat hall. Next. Then coming up, VIV Asia. This is a production livestock show. Jennifer Liu and Luis Santana will be traveling to Thailand with Wisconsin livestock genetics and feed companies. Cial Americas, this is a show that Shirley will be visiting with and working with Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin in their exhibit, working with the dairy companies and introductions to the international buyers that are participating there. So that covers both dairy and crop companies. Cial Americas, this is a new show to the US. This is the second time it's been held in the US. So it'll be a great chance for us to see it up close in person ourselves. Then in April is Food and Hotel Asia in Singapore. Singapore is a hub for shipping of products into that Southeast Asia region. We will, I'll be traveling there to work with Food Export Midwest and providing trade show enhancement services. U.S. Dairy Export Council has a dairy exhibit there, and we will have representation of Wisconsin dairy and crop companies. Then next is a agricultural production show for genetics and feed company that Luis is working on in Morocco, the SIAM show. He is just recently in Morocco, so building on those connections he made, he'll be heading back there for the promotion of our Wisconsin livestock genetics and feed. Then Jennifer Liu is taking a group of Wisconsin wood companies to Interzum in Cologne and promoting our wood industry there. So this is a great opportunity for us to work with a different product sector than we normally do, and we've really been she's been building great momentum over the past several years on wood products exports. Then Jennifer will then host a wood buyers mission into Wisconsin in June, and she's recruiting for that right now. Then Luis will be heading to Spain. This is building on relationships he's built during recent trips to Spain for livestock genetics and feed. This is a livestock production show. And this will be a great opportunity to see what headway we can make in that region. And then DATCP, our international team, is organizing an agricultural trade mission to the UK, London and Manchester in June. And we are recruiting for that mission. So this is all sectors of agriculture that we'd like to see represented. And it'll be led by Secretary Romanski. And Shirley Aceto and Jennifer Liu and Mark Rodehesh will be on that mission as well. So if you have an interest in that, please let us know. And please, go to our DATCP website where we have a calendar of events as you look to see what else we might be doing in FY24. Any questions on that? Oh, thanks, Katy, for putting in the link to your trade ventures in the chat. So people take note if you want to click on that so you can bookmark that website so that you can gain access to all the trade missions that they're doing as well. Any other questions? So I do want to mention that our next meeting is February, someone help me, February 15th, I believe.
15th,
if I'm reading,
yes.
Yeah. The next educational webinar will be February 15th. We'll be working with our chair people, Charles and Chad, for topics for that next meeting. But if you have topics that you would like us to cover, if you could email me, please, I'll put my email in the chat and we can bring that up for discussion. So there we go. So if you have any ideas of what you'd like to hear more about, or a speaker you'd like to hear from, please let me know. So with that, no other questions or comments. Thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. And we look forward to seeing you on February 15th. And just so you know, the presentations will be uploaded to our website. Give us a little time to upload them, but if you want to go back and refer to those, that you will be able to find them on our website, our WIEE pages on our datcap.wi.gov. So thanks very much, and thank you to all of our speakers who could join us today.
Great. Thanks a lot, Lisa. And I will
Stop recording.
Stop the recording, and we'll leave the meeting. So thanks very much, everyone. Great information. Appreciate your sharing that with us, and we look forward to hearing from all of you who are listening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of us. Thank you.